time to go in the Wayback Machine, kids. By the way, you're watching House Sparks Mega Worldwide. Sorry I started a little bit late. And I will, by the way, be starting a little bit late tomorrow. Probably 45 minutes late because we've had to move family FaceTime a little bit later because of scheduling. So work with me. Apologies. That's the thing about live streaming, man. It's just kind of, it's like when you turn on and they preempted the news you want to watch and Andrea Mitchell has just stayed on. It's like that. Sorry. Anyways, so let's go in the Wayback Machine, shall we? There was, at one time, I had a relatively civil online, I wouldn't call it even a relationship because I've never met this person, but maybe so. Social media interaction. I wouldn't go, it's not a relationship. It's a pattern of interaction. That's the best I'm going to give it. It's kind of like reality TV celebrities. They're not celebrities. They're awarities. You're aware they exist, but you don't celebrate them. You'll watch it and you'll see them freak out, but you're not like, I can't wait till their next song comes out because it moves me. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so there's a woman named Carol Roth, and Carol used to be relatively sensible about some things. So we were able to discuss it. We disagreed on things politically, but she was nowhere near like over the edge into MAGA world. And then she started showing up on the Blaze, on Glenn Beck's show as a regular, talking a bunch of shit. And I got to say, it was very disappointing. I was like, how? You should know better. It would seem to me like she should know better. So let me check this out. So, and it's been that way for a while. This now, if I may, hold on, I'm going to do one thing real quick. Let's see, when projector panel, let's see this. Hold on. I got to get out of here, you crazy thing. You crazy thing. There you go. Come on, man. Come on, man. This is my fault for trying to be all cute. Escape. Let me do this. Exit full screen. There we go. All right. Now I'll stretch this out. See if this will work a little better. I basically, for the most part, written her off at this point because anybody who would there we go. Now I can see it. Now I can look and see what's being seen. Damn it. That in the process, pancakes, in the process of her being on the show, I was like, that's disappointing. But, maybe you're just making money and I don't know how seriously you take this shit. Who could say? Thank you, Diane. Don't forget to like the stream. It annoys maggots. Okay, so then we saw this title, ladies and gentlemen. And the thumbnail had Carol Roth, our old friend Carol Roth, in it. Financial expert warns why Trump's tariffs are a risky game. And this is the description. Trump 2024, hashtag Trump 24, hashtag tariffs, hashtag Trump. I don't know why it's still Trump 2024. Okay. Inflation is still up. Prices are still high. GDP is now predicted to decrease. And the legacy media is, of course, blaming President Trump and his tariffs. But financial expert Carol Roth makes the case that they knew this was coming. The economy is still reeling from the Biden era spending. So that's what he says. She says. Now, let's see if that's what she actually says. You think she maybe tips towards some of the precursors, but then, well, check this out. Here we go.
Carol Roth. Hello, Carol. How are you?
Glenn, I just found out that we've only been in this administration for a month and a half-ish.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's been 16 years. So
I know.
There's been so much going on that I'm just trying to process it out. When someone said, it's only been a month and a half, I went, my mind was blown.
Yeah, we're
also, she's saying this, I would like to say for the record, in a manner that kind of gives you the feeling that she doesn't necessarily think of that as a good thing, per se. Yeah? But Glenn's going to try and paint over it. He's going to try and shellac the shit off this and make
40
it shine
days into, they're around 40 days into this administration. And you're looking at this and I'm It's breathtaking at what has been done. Last month, we had, I think, 1,800 encounters at the borders. A year ago, last February, it was 109,000 encounters. That's how much of an impact he's made on that. We have all these things that he's done, but when it comes...
By the way, this just proves the wall didn't work by itself. You have to send down troops. That's all this meant. And you can't do it for free. He's doing it right now under emergency powers, but he needs the funds to actually pay these guys. So they're going to have to blow a hole in the budget to pay $380 billion to fund all this border reinforcement that he's doing. So when Biden said, we need a law before we can do something like this, he was right. That's exactly what's happening. It's exactly what Trump is doing. He's just not, Biden just wouldn't use the emergency powers and pretend there's another pandemic just to get him over the hump. They try to get real, actual legislation passed. Trump is trying to force their hand or I guess make soldiers work for free.
The economy. Congress has to move on some of his things. He hasn't really done anything with the economy except...
Well, tariffs and threats of tariffs, which will have an impact.
Perhaps for Doge, which you've been warning about on this program for a while now. What's happening?
Yes. So, we've talked about before that the economic situation is not really what it was presented to be. We heard under Biden and certainly during election season, what a wonderful economy we had, all of these really great statistics on employment and growth. And it's become very clear. Well, it was very clear to all of us before we've talked about it. It's something that Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, talked about in a speech a couple weeks ago, is that really the economic foundation is incredibly fragile. And what we've had the Biden administration...
Yeah, that wasn't what the Biden administration was pushing, nor was Harris. You can have a fragile foundation as long as you don't hit it with a fucking sledgehammer. Dummy. That's the point. They were the idea was that your tariffs will fuck things up. It will cost everybody their fucking livelihoods. It'll cost the taxpayer a bunch of money on top of just salvaging farmers at the actual grocery store. It matters. Trump's idiotic tariff bullshit is not good for the economy. That's what they were saying. It wasn't like everything's fucking magic. And no matter what he does, you can go in there. It doesn't even really matter what the policies are next year because the thing's on autopilot. Nobody ever said that. This is fiction. But wait, there's less.
Which was exceptionally nefarious, is that they
exceptionally? I feel seen.
Decided that they were going to spend to paper over the weakness of the economy. So if you remember, I think it was back in 2022, we had those 2 down quarters of GDP, which is a technical recession, which for some reason, by the way, they said was not a recession. I'm
Right.
sure if Trump had 2 down quarters, they would say it was.
Depression.
But,
Well, he's going to.
it was had a D in front of it,
Right.
so it wasn't. And then, we came out of it, and then it was pretty clear that we were going to go into this double dip recession. And
no, it wasn't. And no, we didn't. We didn't. We did not go in 2022 into a double dip recession. We didn't. And the first one, again, the contraction was not caused by monetary policy. That's why people didn't call it a recession. It was due to fucking COVID. There are elements of a recession that can happen to an economy, but have nothing to do with if a fucking asteroid hit the Earth, you could talk about the rise of sea levels, but you wouldn't do it in the context of climate change anymore. You would do it in the context of tsunamis. You wouldn't blame the lack of movement on carbon emissions on why everybody's fucking wet all of a sudden. That's the distinct difference. So no, and we didn't end up having a double dip recession. And as a matter of fact, our employment numbers were fantastic. And when they redressed them, had the Fed been cleaner and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, had they been more aware of what the actual market looked like, the Biden would have benefited from the interest rates coming down. It would have helped him. but them keeping it artificially high actually worked against him. The jobs numbers versus the available, monetary supply. So stupid. And by the way, for the record, Glenn has no idea what the fuck she's talking about, but Carol knows this.
What did they do? They decided to increase government spending, which is very inefficient spending. And we've been running deficits as a percentage of GDP that are at wartime levels. We're talking
weird. It's almost like we've been in an extraordinary circumstance the last 5 years. Between COVID and the Ukraine war, that kind of makes sense. Never mind the fucking the war expenditures from Iraq and Afghanistan. Biden brought that to a fucking close. How much money were we throwing down a fucking toilet in Afghanistan, just spending money hand over fist there for a decade longer than we should have been there, if we should have ever been there at all?
6 to 7% of GDP. The historical average is somewhere around 3 or 3.5%.
Also, historically, we don't have a giant worldwide pandemic. These are kind of ahistorical moments. These are extraordinary circumstances. The existence of COVID and how it went across the world is actually a fucking thing. It's actually something. It occurred. People died. The Chinese, at this point, there's no way they lost less than 100 million people. Period. On top of all the other countries that lost people. And that if we hadn't taken any measures, it would have been way fucking worse. And in the process, because China was the factory of the world for a good long while, including the entirety of the Trump presidency, and if he had his hand in further China deals back then, his little China money deals that he was putting together, it would have gone on for another decade. He wouldn't have pushed for reshoring manufacturing or any of the shit. He would have just touted how cheap goods are in the United States. But at the end of it, the world moving its shipping away from China and its manufacturing out of China not only eliminated some things, you just couldn't get them for a while. It delayed them, and anybody in a hurry was willing to pay a lot more. But also, once you move that here or you move it anywhere else where labor costs are higher than they had historically been there for a decade or two, then the cost was going to go up and is going to go up. That's inflation because of supply and demand. It has nothing to do with how much money is floating in the fucking system.
So about double, what you might see on average. Not, when you have a good economy, you would actually expect that to be much lower because you're getting more receipts. And that's what happened. We had more receipts.
Really? You're telling me that we had fewer receipts coming out of a worldwide pandemic that fucked supply chains into a cocked hat? Really? Receipts were down? And again, I've said this before, and here's the thing. Glenn is too stupid to even conceptualize this, but Carol knows better, in theory. COVID cost the United States, at a bare minimum, $20 trillion in impact, in dead people, in lost business, in collapsed elements of the economy, and in the cost of reshoring stuff to shorten supply chains from everything from chips to steel and all the stuff that would come ancillary. $20 trillion minimum. And we patched that hole with $9 trillion of effective quantitative easing or mortgage support and shit like that, and PPP loans. There is no way to spackle shut a $20 trillion hole with $9 trillion. And at the end of it, you certainly don't come out in a situation where you have more dollars in circulation than you had before that. There are 3 countries during the Biden administration that switched to the U.S. dollar as their primary currency. One of them, by the way, being Javier Milei, touting the fact we're going to use the U.S. dollar, right? The big darling of the right. Where the fuck do you think those dollars come from? They get loaned into existence just like the dollars in circulation in the United States, but we are now, here's the other thing too, is this percentage of GDP thing drives me fucking crazy, because if you just use the U.S.'s GDP, it's still well within the barriers of something that happened after an extraordinary circumstance like COVID. But I think it's only fair that you fucking include the GDP of Turkey and the GDP of fucking Guatemala, or no, sorry, it's Argentina. Argentina has switched to the dollar. And then 2 other African countries switched to the dollar in the last 3 years. Why aren't we, since it's U.S. dollars are the entire trade base of those countries, why is that GDP not included in the U.S. currency measurement? Or at least shave it off. At least go, well, there's this much money and there's interests around that money and the existence of that money or whatever. We don't count that because that's not inside the contiguous United States. It's not in the lower 48 plus Alaska and Hawaii, right?
We were taking in almost $5 trillion.
We were spending
the U.S. government. And they're spending even more. They're spending almost $7 trillion. So that was done to mask the weakness in the economy.
The world economy.
Now that we don't have the ability to continue to kick up even more and more to show growth,
what are you talking about? Trump has just asked the House for $4 trillion added to the to their budget this year for him. $4 trillion extension of the debt ceiling. $1 trillion worth of funny money every year.
Consumer continues to be tapped out from all the Biden era policies, and the fact that we have DOGE, which is
sorry, real quick. What? They're what now?
All the Biden era policies.
Hold on. Say that again.
Growth. The consumer continues to be tapped out from all the Biden era policies. And
the consumer continues to be tapped out because of the Biden era policies. Okay. Sorry. Consumer spending U.S. Let's see. Washington. U.S. consumer spending fell for the first time in nearly 2 years in January, and the goods trade deficit widened to a record high as businesses front-loaded imports to avoid tariffs. Gee, those awful Biden-era policies of Trump tariffs. Son of a bitch. Come here. Oh, it's this one. Sorry. Mm-hmm. You know, it's this right here. Here you go. Hold on. U.S. consumer spending posts first drop in almost 2 years. You don't say. Why would that be? U.S. consumer spending fell for the first time in nearly 2 years in January, and the goods trade deficit widened to a record high as businesses front-loaded imports to avoid tariffs, setting up the economy for weak growth or even a contraction this quarter. While the data from the Commerce Department on Friday also showed a moderation in annual inflation last month, prices showed some stickiness and with fairly solid monthly gains. In addition, Trump's administration is ratcheting up tariffs, which economists said would raise prices as businesses pass on the higher costs of imported goods to consumers. Consumers' inflation expectations soared in February. The Atlanta Federal Reserve slashed its gross domestic product estimate for the first quarter to show the economy contracting a 1.5% annualized rate from 2.3% growth pace earlier. Financial markets now expect the Federal Reserve to resume cutting interest rates in June, following a pause in January to give policymakers time to assess the economic impact of the administration's policies. Combination of sticky inflation and potential growth scare, which is evident in this report, will likely present a worrisome monetary policy conundrum for the Fed. Because tariffs.
The fact that we have DOGE, which is trying to cut down government spending, we're at a situation where things could get uglier before they get better.
Right.
Yeah. They're just going to get uglier before they get better. Now, is there a guarantee they're going to get better, besides the fact that you think the sun shines out of Trump's asshole? The answer is no.
They could get uglier and they could take away the political will to make them better. And that's,
right. They might, the bad stuff might go on for so long that people lose trust that this asshole knows what he's doing, which he does not.
this delicate dance that we've been talking about, why we need this careful choreography. The craziest thing that's happened over the past several days is that the Atlanta Fed, one of the branches of the Federal Reserve that has a tool that predicts GDP for each quarter, they went in the last 4 weeks, 4 weeks time, from predicting that we were going to have almost 4% GDP growth in the first quarter to
no, in the year. No, it was not. We're not going to have 4% fucking growth in the first quarter of the year. Citation needed, but okay.
Now, negative 3% in the first quarter.
How's that possible?
a seven.
I'll tell you how it's possible. You're on the freeway, and you're building up speed to a concerning level where they think actually we're overheating. We might actually be going too fast on this. And then you hand the wheel over to somebody who throws the fucking car in reverse. And now, are you going zero? Do you just squeal to a stop? Or do you, if you're going uphill, do you stop and then you start rolling backward? No, you spin and fucking tumble as your wheels give out, dummy. Which is worse than just going backwards.
Percentage point difference in 4 weeks, which just goes to show what a joke, any of this reporting and these tools and this data are.
No. You don't get to just go, that's just not normal. That's it. Well, neither is fucking with tariffs on a massive, pointless scale on everything bought and sold in the fucking country. That's what they're using as the marker. If he's going to do these things like he says he's going to do them, this is going to be the impact. Shut the fuck up.
But I think also shows, hey, we've got somebody else at the helm here, so now we don't need to doctor these numbers in a way that seem a bit more friendly. And it's so
okay. So the Fed is going to fake the numbers to make Trump look bad because Biden was threatening the fucking Fed? Or could it possibly be that his tariff shit is insane and it will have this kind of an impact because it's so extraordinary and out of pace with reality that this is what happens when you throw the fucking economy in a reverse? It's almost like we elected Marianne Williamson with her whole, we're going to turn this economy around 180 degrees. Well, that sounds safe. That's like saying we're swimming towards the surface. We're not quite there yet. We need to turn this swimming around 180 degrees.
Where we potentially could be seeing something ugly, which is something that we've talked about many, many times. And this has been a setup that they knew was coming. If you go back to the middle of last year, you had a...
Sorry, so they said it. They set this up. They knew it was going to happen next year. And so what are you going to tell me? That Harris threw the race? That the Democrats tapped out and went, oh, fuck it, man. Let them fucking... Because I've joked about this, but she seems serious.
Bunch of quote-unquote Nobel economists that put out a piece that said that, Trump was going to create inflation. He was going to do all these bad things to the economy. And I called...
And then he did.
Out right then and there and said, this is a setup. They know this is coming no matter what. And so they are setting the groundwork to blame this on Trump. And so, get ready for...
Yeah, but what if she'd have won? I mean, if it was already set and then they were going to blame it on him, why wouldn't Harris be to blame too? Because she and Biden had actually been in power for 4 years. Conspiratorial gibberish.
Talking points. Trump's been, as we said, only in there for 6 weeks. He hasn't even really had a chance to do anything about the economy.
Yes, he has. He's specifically done something. He has instigated tariffs, pulled them off, threatened them, and is threatening a blanket tariff that will start on April 2nd, right? These tariffs are just going to go on the 2nd. The reciprocal trade is going to fucking start on those days, and he might roll them back, but nobody knows. And the insecurity of that means that nobody can purchase anything if they're going to develop anything or expand their business because they don't know what the fucking prices are going to be. So that sucks the wind out of the sails of anybody's expansion or growth in business. She knows this. This is just a lie.
I mean, Congress certainly isn't helping. And yet we're already getting the rhetoric that, look what he did to our really great economy.
Correct me if I'm wrong here.
I'm just going to go with you're going to be wrong to start with. I don't feel like it's even necessary to correct you. I think we're just going to call it wrong.
Carol, but the Biden administration, while they spent a lot of money, they did it in ways to cover things up, et cetera, et cetera. But that big 2021, $1.2 trillion bill, and then the $836 billion for roads and bridges and broadband, and then the $144 in the Inflation Reduction Act.
Oh, this is going to be so good. This is going to be so good. I know what he's going to say. He's going to say, can't we just claw back that money because it hasn't been spent? Even though it has, largely. But we'll let him live in his delusion.
It's well over $1 trillion, and it's my understanding that only 17% of that money has been spent. So what happens if we don't stop the spending of just the stuff that is already on the books from Biden? Wouldn't that cause our inflation to go through the roof?
Hey, asshole. Both of you have been saying we have inflation through the roof because that money was already spent. Now that Trump's in and Harris isn't, this is the roads and bridges and shit. It's been promised and allocated for a lot of these projects, and a lot of it has been spent. But the idea is that you were telling us that the reason why prices went up is because the government threw all these programs, threw all this money into circulation, and now everybody's awash in fucking dollars, and the price of everything goes up because everybody's got more dollars sitting in their pocket than they need. And then you want to come back and say that, no, nowhere near that amount of money has been allocated at all. Just 17% of it has gone out the door, and it caused all this inflation, even though it hasn't. And Donald Trump and Doge are going to claw it all back and not spend it. There has not been a single quote unquote saving, a single dollar saved from Doge that they are not spending elsewhere. They are shuffling dollars. They are not returning any of it to the taxpayer. And Trump wants to do it in the form of his tax cut, but he needs to extend the debt ceiling to do it, because $65 billion in programs you hate that you were going to cut anyways is not going to patch a $2 trillion fucking hole in the federal yearly budget. Especially if they're programs and contracts that would have gone on for 5 years. Certainly not going to solve this year, $2 trillion this year, and then $2 trillion next year, and then $2 more trillion the year after that, and $2 more trillion after that, right? It's not $7 trillion the entirety of his presidency. It's $7 trillion a year. 5.8 worth of receipts coming in, about a little over like $1.5 trillion to $2 trillion, depending, deficit. You're not going to patch that by ending a $60,000 contract that lasted 5 years and only paid out $60,000 over the course of 5 fucking years. And worst off, this guy goes, we have inflation because there's too much money. This fucking Tommy Billieu bullshit that everybody throws around. There's too much money in circulation. No, there isn't. Or the dollar wouldn't be worth more than a fucking dollar, dummy.
Yeah, it absolutely would cause our inflation to go through the roof because, even with the cash in and cash out that we have, as we said, we're running these wartime level deficits. And by
the pandemic time, I would like to say. It's kind of like when they say military age men crossing the border, when it's really, I would argue it's roofing age men.
We're financing those at high interest rates, not necessarily in the historical context, but in the context of the last 15 years, and in a way that we have now made the interest expense on our debt, what we're paying for stuff we've already bought, the financing charges exceed what we're spending on defense.
Which, by the way, does anybody, fuck me, chat room, real quick, pardon me while I interrupt. Does anybody know the Republican Congress's answer to the fact that we are spending more on interest on the debt than we are on defense. Da, 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 da. What's their solution? Hey, if you guessed spend more on defense, you'd be right. That's right. We can't be spending more on interest than we're spending on the debt. So let's just up how much we're spending on defense. Genius. Problem solved. Last year, we were spending more on the national debt than we were on defense. And this year, that is absolutely reversed. Oh, can you see? God damn. So dumb.
Niall Ferguson has a great sort of maxim, if you will, that basically, I'm paraphrasing here, but nations that spend more on interest versus debt don't remain great nations for very long.
Right.
And that seems to be pretty obvious, something that everybody can wrap their heads around.
Except Japan and UK, especially post-war, went through a decade at least, where they were doing exactly that.
That we don't want to be spending all of our money, paying for stuff that we've quote unquote already bought, and we certainly.
Well, let's address that for a second. If you're talking about condoms and canned goods, I'm with you. Although actually the condoms one is a bad example because the investment in a condom is money spent, but perhaps it saved you some money down the line. You know what I'm saying? That said, whether in childcare or at the doctor's office, I suppose. But in the meantime, the investment, if you're investing in infrastructure, for example, you're not only spending that money on roads and bridges, you're also increasing the transportation security of your country for trade. So you're improving roads and bridges and now trucks can cross them with goods and not fall into the fucking lake below or whatever, the river below. So the stuff gets where it's going. Okay, so that's an investment. It's not just a one-to-one on the dollars. The benefits of a fucking bridge that doesn't collapse. I think we can all understand that investment plays out for decades past the time it takes to actually fix the bridge, almost no matter how much the fucking bridge costs. So, right, that money is stuff we've already bought, stuff we've already spent, as it were. But we're going to get the benefits of it for way longer, even if it's, and the debt on it, the interest on that bridge is probably way lower than the benefit on GDP that it does connecting one state to another or crossing fucking Ohio and Kentucky over the Ohio River and allowing business and people to live and go back and forth, right? So I would argue the bridge is money we already spent. We're paying interest on that. But what's gained financially from that bridge being functional and useful and safe and allowing for more traffic is worth more than even the interest you're paying on that bridge. So fuck off with your disdain for infrastructure flat out. Then we go to military spending. Is all military spending just the bullets and the barrels that come out of that? No, it's training, it's bases, it's the stuff that if a day comes where you have to fight a war, all that investment is fucking worth it. And if you didn't do it, your fucking country will get overrun, right? Is that worth more than the interest on the debt in the future if you are invaded, if somebody decides to do it? Of course it is. So this childish, we're paying interest on shit we already bought like it's a fucking credit card. And, if a family around the kitchen table made these kind of decisions, if a family around a kitchen table would not be talking about a fucking dam that they built to power half a state. So aggravating. And it's so fucking lame and childish.
at these levels cannot afford to do that. If we continue to do that, and this kind of goes into another conversation that we've had before, Glenn, too, is that central banks around the world who used to be our friends in support of the U.S. being the world's reserve currency used to just buy treasuries. It's kind of part of the deal here on an ongoing basis. Over the past 11 or so years, they have been net sellers of treasuries. They've actually replaced that with gold on their balance sheet. So if we don't have central banks that will just buy treasuries whenever, because that's part.
Okay. Two primary central banks she's talking about that tilt that weight in another direction. Guess which ones they are. Guess. If you guessed Russia and China, you'd be right. If you also guessed places like Bank of Cyprus, where Wilbur Ross used to fucking work, and the Russian oligarchs park all their fucking money, and the fact that those assholes have been kicked out of the SWIFT system, so they have to trade in gold, you'd also be right. Yeah, you'd be to bring that up. I'm getting aggravated, but it's fun.
The geopolitical deal, that means you have to find people who are looking at the price. They're looking at the price of the treasuries, and basically, at these levels, even though they've come off a little bit, and we can talk about that too. But there's
nope. You don't get to caveat it that they're suddenly evening out because post-COVID, that's what people will do.
They're overall saying.
Also, don't forget the 12-year part of it, of really, focusing on right after the financial crash of 2009 into 2010, and people using, making a point to avoid, unsecured, securities on a massive scale, wanting to have gold and shit like that after 2008. Also triggered by Republicans, by the way.
Yeah, we're not going to do that. We need, to have a reprice here. And, when you don't have enough demand, you end up seeing our yields go higher. And to the extent they end up too high, which we were dangerously close to a few weeks ago, that has come off now.
Why were they going up? Oh, because of the tariff threat against Mexico and Canada that Trump then took off, and then they went back down. And then we reached this date and they started to go up again. And then they went back down.
But if you hit that could end up causing a debt spiral. It could end up causing a mismanagement, or excuse me, not a mismanagement, but basically a throwing up, if you will, of the treasury market and have global implications.
So let me just explain this so the average person can understand what
you're about to hear. Some of the stupidest shit you have ever heard in your life. I promise you. Just him prefacing it with this it is just a warning, just red flag idiocy on the march.
Said, you're wanting to buy a new house.
Cool. Buy a new house. Here's the analogy. You want to buy a new house. Here it comes.
And the interest rates are up at 8%.
Okay. So they're half what my parents paid for their house when I was a kid. Okay.
Hey, honey, I don't think we should buy a new house. The interest rate is way too high. And somebody says, well, historically not. Well, historically, yeah, you might be right. But we're not buying in the 1980s right now. We're buying today with our financial situation. So I don't think we're going to buy the house.
Yeah, but if you also want to compare the dollars that you made back then versus the dollars you'd make now, that even though the federal minimum wage hasn't gone up in a long time, you were probably making $2 in the 70s or early 80s to, $10, $12 on average everywhere else. So that's gone up precipitously with that interest rate. Whereas the interest rate has actually come down long term as the volume of dollars has gone out and the country has expanded. So no.
What a normal person would do. And you'd start saving money to buy a house later.
No, you wouldn't. You'd only save money to buy a house later if you thought the interest rates were coming down, for one. You'd probably put it in securities or T-bills or something like that. That's $1,000 bills, right? I'm always fascinated by people who talk like that about money. Yeah, I put it in T-bills. That's good. Yep. Oolong tea. I put them all in. Yep. I buy my tea on credit and they bill me. So no, no, you wouldn't. Especially if you project outward that it's just going to keep going up and the cost of the house is going to go up along with it.
That's not what the government is doing. They're saying let's buy the house at these high interest rates anyway. But when
No. What the government is saying is we have a hole in the roof and we have to patch it. And if we don't patch the hole in the roof, the whole house is worthless. So we have to borrow the money to patch the roof. And 8% is not a big deal compared to 19 or 20%.
you have poor credit, really good banks are going to say, no, I'm not going to take your loan. That's what she's talking about with the central banks. They're like, I don't want it. I'd rather buy gold because I don't trust that you guys are ever going to get out of debt. And so what happens? Loan sharks step in. This is what she's saying about the yield going up. The loan sharks step in and they say, I can make this deal for you. I'm gonna.
All right. So this is Glenn's opportunity to do a silly voice because he thinks it makes him look like he's smart. The yield is not going up to 21%, and she just told you it came back down. Fucking 10, whatever. Hold on. Treasury yields. Let's look at this real quick. This is such a weird thing. Let's see. Let's just do Treasury yield. Market. There we go. So, U.S. government bond yields shifted back towards the lowest level of the year, and mounting investor conviction that a trade-induced growth slowdown will lead the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates multiple times in 2025. There we go. Bullish picture emerges for treasuries as investor focus pivots from inflationary risks to outright negative economic consequences from Trump's behavior. This has nothing to do with the Biden administration and the fucking we're buying a house. Aided by a drop in the price of crude oil to a 6-month low, the Treasury market rallied after a gauge of hiring by U.S. companies fell short of nearly all economists' estimates for February. Some of the gains were paired following a subsequent stronger than anticipated report on services and historic sell-off of German government bonds. A broader gauge of U.S. February job gains is set for release on Friday. Yields on 2-year notes, more sensitive to federal interest rate changes for lower maturities, led the move to lower levels, falling nearly 10 basis points to 3.89% before rebounding to 3.95%. The 10-year note was little changed, around 4.2%, at 4.25% after falling to 4.18% across maturities. Treasury yields touched 2025 lows on Tuesday. It's a bullish environment for treasuries. I suspect the 10-year can't go below 4% just yet. So, though Friday's employment data will be key, the weakness could lower the expected floor for the Fed's policy rate, which means the federal government can borrow more money with the treasuries being at a lower amount. You get more money for a lower amount because there's this belief system that people are gonna hide their money in that shit, and that everybody's gonna want some because they want to ride this shit out. They don't want to sit on their cash while Trump blows up the fucking store. But Carol thinks his Italian guy is not bigoted at all, but comedy.
12%, eh? You're like, 12%? That's outrageous. You're going to do it or you're not going to do it? What do you want?
Now, I'd like to remind you that the yields we're talking about are 3.9% and 4.18%. And they're, in theory, coming down. That's what she meant. They paired off some of it in the last little bit. They're nowhere near 8 or 12%.
So we're burying ourselves with loan sharks. That's why I believe the president needs to say tonight, Congress must pass a budget. It must have cuts. I'd love him to say it must have $1 trillion.
Yeah, he didn't say that. He did. I don't know if you saw that part, but he didn't say that, Glenn. He didn't go anywhere near that. As a matter of fact, he wants more money to spend more on the border. he was expecting their budget to go up. He liked both what the House and the Senate were putting forward. The Senate giving him $340 billion more than Biden's budget last year, and the House giving him $4 trillion in expansion of the debt ceiling to play with over the next 4 years. Or all at once. I'm sorry. I assumed, you know what, silly me? I'm assuming that $4 trillion bump is something that he could use like $1 trillion a year. He could work it out that way. But no, that's not the case either. No, he could blow it all this year. Why the fuck not? Why not just do the tax break and fuck everybody? That's basically what he's hoping for anyways.
Bare minimum of cuts to show the rest of the world that we're serious.
Yeah, that didn't happen, and it's not going to happen, and he's not even asking for that, and you're a nutcase.
I don't know why Javier Milei can do these things, but we can't.
Because he's using the U.S. dollar instead of his own currency? Because if we do it, he's affected. He's riding on the volume of our monetary system.
However,
Yeah.
However, Glenn, if we cut, as we've talked about, we cut $1 trillion.
Oh boy, here comes. This is where Carol grabs the wheel and lurches Glenn's dipshit truck into the ditch.
We just cut it off very carefully, and we don't choreograph it like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. And then we don't have that in our GDP. Then we have a shrunken economy. We're taking in less receipts, and
Sorry, what was that, Carol? So if we cut $1 trillion from the federal government, we're taking in less receipts in taxes, and that will shrink the economy. I thought federal spending was a very inefficient way of making money. And now you're telling me that $1 trillion that we're spending is actually expanding the economy and giving us more receipts to pull from. And if you take it away, you'll contract the economy and perhaps trigger a recession. Gee, I'm starting to think that everything you and Glenn have been talking about for years is bullshit.
actually explode the deficit,
Right.
which could end up.
No, you don't get to say right, motherfucker. Glenn, you don't get right. Yeah, totally. If we cut $1 trillion, you just told him he had to say it to let people know we're serious. Otherwise, the loan sharks are going to break our fucking knees. Good Lord. I guess you can't have a double standard if you have no standards at all.
In a debt spiral. So yes,
Okay,
Congress needs to do their part, but it needs to be done very surgically. And that is the ultimate challenge. That is the mess that the Biden administration left.
No. You don't get to lay it on. If it's surgical and you can only surgically remove it, then it isn't a mess they laid for you. It's just that you actually have to do your fucking job. Congress. I mean, not these two, because they're just
For
flat.
Trump.
If I were king of the world today,
We'd all be dead by tomorrow.
I could go in and say, Congress, this is what you're going to do. I would say to them, you're going to cut $1 trillion, plus you're going to pass either a flat tax or 15, what the president has talked about, and you're going to cut 50% of all regulations. Just cut them right now. And you're going to...
Yes, and half the populace would be dead in a year. From God knows what. I don't know. Suddenly there's asbestos every fucking where you turn, and the water's polluted, and there's fucking natural gas wells popping off all over the place. There's like every major city's downwind from fucking methane. Cut 50% of the regulations. No, you don't get to just do fucking half of them, asshole. She was just telling you how you have to be surgical with the economic cuts, and you're like, I don't know, get rid of half of them. Half the vaccines, measles, mumps, and rubella. We'll keep mumps and rubella, but we'll leave measles. Chickenpox or no HPV or I don't know, like whatever. What's another one? Whooping cough. Do we kill kids or teenage girls? What do we get? Either we get, what do you want? Let's flip a coin. Cancer or an easily curable disease in preschools. What the fuck? Like, this is just nonsense. Nobody is rolling in there going, we're going to cut 50% of regulations sight unseen. What do you even mean? If you're king for a fucking day, what, you're just going to go, anything I don't like. We're going to cut regulations. Here's a big shocker, Glenn. a bunch of those cuts would negatively affect the economy. Here's a good one. Cut all the ones around crypto. See how long that shit lasts.
Pass the REINS Act. That would change the dynamics of the economy.
You're right. We would become fucking Burma.
Yes, we would have all of that spending going away from our GDP, from the government. Good. But money would flow into our country and jobs would be created.
Why? And what kind of money? You mean cartel money?
And we'd ignite the engine at the same time.
That's what it was. Yes, you'll put the fire back in the belly of the American people who really want to start a fucking steel mill in their backyard, but the government regulations are stopping them from, if I could, I'd build a nuclear reactor to run my house off of. And you know what, Glenn, talk to somebody and get the rules and regulations around uranium, plutonium, and thorium, get half of them. I don't need all of them gone. But half of them. I would like access to half of those things so that I could make a fucking nuclear reactor for my yard so I can be off grid. Fuck my neighbor's, testicular cancer.
That's what has to happen. But that's not going to be the president's fault if it doesn't happen.
Why not? You have the House and the Senate.
What a surprise. It's going to be the lame-ass GOP that will screw this up.
All right. Well, yeah. You do realize Trump is a part of the lame-ass GOP.
He's got to get them on path. Okay, is there anything else you think we need to hit here on the economy before we get to some good news?
I mean, this was going to be probably a whole other segment, but I'll just throw out there at some point we need to have a discussion about these tariffs. Now,
yes, we do, Carol. Here it comes. And they moved it to a whole other segment. Let's grab this and then I'll move on.
Probably not the time because it's a very large discussion.
Okay.
But we need to have a discussion about these tariffs.
Okay.
Yeah. Come on, Glenn. We need to have a discussion about these tariffs, about how great they are and how they're going to make everything so much better. And we're going to have so much money flowing in. It's going to be like fucking 1885 all over again, especially tuberculosis.
Let's do that now. Go ahead. Let's start there.
All right. So basically, what did the American people hire Trump to do, right? They hired
I don't know, frightened immigrants.
To stabilize prices, to get things.
No. They did not. No, they didn't. Shut the fuck up. They did not. They didn't hire him to stabilize prices, you dunce. They hired him to lower prices instantly and magically.
Things more normalized. And yes, we have these issues around the world in terms of where we stand in trade. However,
sorry, we have these issues around the world in terms of where we stand in trade.
As we have been talking about, we just talked about, this needs to be very surgical. We need to have Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers doing the choreography. We don't need to have Bull in a china shop.
Too bad, too late. Fuck you. That's exactly what we have, which is exactly why the Fed views Trump's economic stuff that he's doing as throwing the fucking car in reverse while you're going 90 down an icy freeway.
The tariff situation, given the precarious economic situation that Biden has left us, and the fact...
Yeah, always lay it off on him. It can't possibly be that this is just bad news on its face.
That the citizens of the United States want price stability is absolutely maddening. I understood art of the deal. I understood the first time around that we're trying to put some pressure, show who's the big dog, get people to come to the table. But now, we're going after our allies.
Whoops. Uh-oh. Carol apparently has woken up from her coma. She has apparently realized where she has been flopping for the last little bit, and it's quite the shock, I would imagine.
We're trying to kind of separate ourselves from China. Well, we have companies who decided to move manufacturing from China to Mexico so that they could be more aligned with the United States and North America, and now we're putting these crazy tariffs on it.
Crazy. Yeah, these crazy tariffs. Other than that, I can't think of anything that's happened in the last 4 fucking weeks that might change the financial outlook for the entire fucking country the way the Fed says they're going to, except the fact that you just said
This is something that, frankly, nobody in any economic circle that I know understands the strategy,
Okay, so
and does not seem to be consistent with what it is we've been talking about.
Okay, Glenn, your turn, buddy. Bring it home. Salvage this bullshit, because you can't.
May I suggest Donald Trump?
It's going to hurt, isn't it? I don't know what he's going to say, but it's going to... Motherfucker, chat room, you know. He's going to say some stupid shit. It's just going to be, and it's going to be even dumber than I think, isn't it? Here we go.
Plays many different games all at once. And
Donald Trump plays many different games all at once. Well, besides the fact that it's not a fucking game, maybe he should focus on just one, since he doesn't seem to know the rules to any of them.
Strategy when it comes to Canada and Mexico, I don't think has anything to do really with the economy. It has...
You don't say.
Anything to do with the border. He's saying, help us with the border. Help stop the flow of illegals, stop fentanyl, and recognize that your cartels are terror organizations.
Okay, fucko. First of all, leave Canada out of this. Canada doesn't have cartels. The amount of fentanyl that comes across the border from Canada is less than the amount of like meth that comes from the United States into fucking Canada. It's not even a fair trade. Why the fuck would you bother with Canada with this shit? Why wouldn't it all be Mexico and China, right? That's the idea. Mexico gives them the precursors, China gives them the precursors, Mexico makes the shit, dumps it in the United States, cartel, right? That's what we've heard. The fuck does this have to do with Canada? At all. I'm sorry, we're going to attack Canadian dairy because we have a trade deficit with narcotics? They bring in a suitcase full of fucking fentanyl a year, and we send in 8 trucks worth of meth. And this has, and ultimately you're like, this has to be done because this really isn't about the economy.
Work with us. If you don't want to, that's fine. You'll get it.
First of all, they already are. They already were.
He's not saying, you're charging us too much for our milk and not enough for your milk.
Yes, he is. That's exactly what he's saying. Wait a minute. You don't get to flip the entire conversation on its fucking head and pretend we can't hear what he actually... Jesus Christ. I knew it was going to be dumb. You're right, chat room. You're right. I hear you. I feel you. Yeah.
Whatever. That is part of it, but that's not really what he's after, I believe, on the tariffs with Canada and Mexico.
I agree that was the first time we tried this and he got them to the table. And now we need to have sort of a different situation because the reality is that, as you said, he's made huge strides.
Careful, Carol. You're walking off the blaze.
We have a tiny fraction of the encounters at the border. So that is moving in the right direction. But things like price stability are not necessarily yet moving in the right direction.
Oh, what? Oh, what? Price stability isn't moving. Bitch, the prices are going up. Fuck is wrong with you? It's not about stability at all. They're continuing to rise. When he said he would lower them quickly and easily and cheaply and beautifully and boldly and blah, blah, fucking blah.
And to throw this into the mix at a time that is so precarious from an economic situation, even if that is the ultimate outcome, it seems like the wrong tactic to take because the situation on the economic front is so volatile. Find another path to do that.
Okay.
Woof. Ladies and gentlemen, that's I think that's the last time we're going to see Carol Roth on the fucking blaze anytime soon. And by the way, this is not the only place this conversation is having. Now, you and I, folks, ladies and gentlemen, you and I have been having this conversation ourselves for quite some time about, of course, they're going to pass on the costs of the tariffs to customers. Of course they are. What do you think? You think Walmart's just going to suck it up for Red America? Are you out of your mind?